My mother called on a Tuesday morning, said my father was in the hospital, said had been serious, said she thought I should know. She did not ask me to come. She understood the situation well enough to know that asking would not produce the right kind of coming. She just gave me the information and let me decide what to do with it. I sat with it for a long time, for years of silence, for years of building something in the complete absence of the person who had said it was an embarrassment, who had said it was reckless, who had said it reflected badly on our family, who had made the specific choice to name those things loudly, in front of people, in a way that had closed a door I had not been certain I wanted to open again. I thought about staying away. That option was available, was perhaps the cleaner option from a distance. Then I thought about what staying away was actually for, who was serving, what was costing, and I understood that the silence had stopped being about him a long time ago and had become about something in me that needed to be examined. I got in the car, drove to the hospital, not because he deserved it, because I had already won, and winning from behind a closed door is not the same thing as winning at all. But to understand what that hospital room felt like, you need to know what the 4 years had built. My father is a man who believes in the visible forms of success, not out of shallowness, out of the specific experience of someone who grew up without them, who had learned early that stability was not guaranteed, that the absence of it produced a specific kind of suffering, and who had organized his entire adult life around ensuring that suffering would not be repeated. Not by him, not by his children. He had built a stable life through the particular discipline of someone for whom stability was not a default, but an achievement. A professional career, a house paid off carefully, the specific accumulated security of decades of sensible decisions. He was proud of that, in the way that people who have built something against the odds are proud of it. Not loudly, in the specific way that his generation expressed these things. Through expectation, through the particular pressure of wanting his children to have what he had built, or something better, on the foundations he had laid. I had understood that from childhood. I respected it, had not resented the expectation even when the expectation was visible and consistent, because I had understood where it came from, what it was trying to provide. The falling out happened when I was 31. The business idea had been developing for 2 years. A specific opportunity one had identified. A gap in the market I understood well enough to believe I could fill it. The preparation had been thorough, not reckless. The kind of preparation that serious people do before serious decisions. I told him over a dinner, my mother present, my wife present, which I had thought would provide a particular kind of stability to the conversation. Context that might soften the landing. I was wrong about that. He listened to the outline, asked the questions he always asked, about security, about what happened if it failed, about what I was giving up. I answered them, clearly, with the specific confidence of someone who had done the preparation, who was not asking for permission, who was sharing a decision that had already been made. That was where it went wrong. The not asking for permission, which I had not understood at the time as the specific trigger it was. He did not receive the decision well, not in private concern, in the particular way of a man who processes things through expression rather than through containment. He said it was reckless, said it more than once, said it with the specific force of someone who has decided they need to be heard. My mother said something that was meant to bridge. He said something in response that was not bridging. That was the sharpest version of what he had been saying, that it was an embarrassment to have a son who would throw away stability for something that sounded like a fantasy, that reflected badly on what he had built, on the values he had tried to pass on. I looked at him across the table and understood something clearly, that there was nothing I could say in that moment that would produce a different version of this conversation, that the gap between what he needed me to be and what I had decided to be was too large for a dinner table to bridge, that staying in the conversation was going to cost me something I was not willing to pay. I stood up, said I hoped he would understand in time, that I was not going to change the decision, and that I needed him to know that, even if it was not what he wanted to hear. He said something as I left, The kind of thing people say in the heat of an exchange that they often wish they could retrieve. I did not retrieve it for him. I walked out, and the silence began. The silence was a choice. I want to be clear about that. Not something that simply happened. Something I maintained, deliberately, with the specific intention of someone who has decided that a boundary is necessary and is willing to hold it. He called twice in the first month. I did not answer, not from cruelty, from the understanding that answering before enough time had passed would produce a version of the same conversation, that the emotional conditions of the dinner had not yet settled enough for anything useful to emerge from contact. The messages he left were not apologies. They were the particular version of outreach that a man of his specific kind produces, which was more concerned with re-establishing contact than with examining what had made contact impossible. I did not return the calls. My mother maintained relationship with both of us, in a specific way that mothers navigate these situations, without taking sides explicitly, without requiring either party to account for the other, just staying in contact with both, keeping the lines open in the way that only the person in the middle can keep them open. She did not pressure me toward contact, did not tell me what he was saying or feeling, just stayed present, available, a continuous line connecting two people who had stopped connecting directly. I had told her I needed time. She had accepted that without argument. The business consumed the first 2 years, not as a distraction from the silence, as the thing I had decided was more important than anything the silence was costing me. Because the specific logic of the situation was this. He had called the decision reckless, had called it an embarrassment. The only response to that which meant anything was the work. Not a conversation, not a letter explaining my reasoning, not a demonstration of patience that produced a reconciliation before the business had proved itself. The work, the actual building of the thing he had dismissed, into something real enough that dismissal was no longer a credible position. So I worked, with the particular focus of someone who understands that what they are building is not just a business. It is an argument, and the argument needs to be made through results, not through words. My wife was present throughout, had been from before the dinner, had received the whole situation with the specific steadiness of someone who had already decided that her relationship with me did not require my relationship with my father to be any particular thing. She understood the silence, had not pushed toward contact, had not suggested I was wrong to maintain the boundary, had simply been there for the life we were building, which was genuinely good, genuinely ours, not organized around the absence at its edge, just full, in the way a life can be full when the person living it has directed their attention toward what they have rather than what they are withholding from. By the end of the second year, the business had produced results, not dramatic results, real ones, the kind that tell you the foundation is sound, that what you built is doing what you built it to do. By the end of the third year, the results were visible to people beyond me. By the middle of the fourth year, the business was the thing he had said it couldn't be, and I was the person he had said I couldn't be by choosing it. The silence had held for 4 years, not without cost, with cost, the specific cost of a severed relationship with a parent, which is not nothing, even when the severing was the right decision, even when the maintenance of it was the right decision, even when what was being protected was real and worth protecting. It still cost something. I had been paying that cost for 4 years. And then my mother called on a Tuesday morning, and the cost of staying away suddenly felt different, larger than I had understood it to be. When I examined it in the new light of a father who was ill, the drive to the hospital took about 40 minutes. I spent most of it thinking, not about the dinner, not about the specific things that had been said, about the question my mother's call had made unavoidable. What was the silence actually for now? Because silence is a tool. Like any tool, it has a purpose. And when you examine a tool, honestly, you have to ask whether the purpose it was built for is still the purpose it is serving. The silence had originally been built for protection of the business, of the specific focus required to build it. of the particular thing that gets damaged when the person who matters most to you has named your most important choice an embarrassment and is present in your life as a daily reminder of that naming. The silence had removed that presence, had created the specific clean space in which the work could happen, without the weight of his disapproval sitting in the room alongside it. That had been its purpose, and it had served that purpose. The business was built. The results existed. The argument that had needed to be made in the language of outcomes rather than words had been made, in the most complete form available. The tool had done what it was built to do, and I was still carrying it, for years later, past the point of its usefulness. Not because he deserved the silence to end, because I had built it for a reason, and the reason no longer existed, which meant the silence was now serving something else. And when I examined what it was serving, I found something I was not comfortable naming, but that needed to be named. It was serving me, not in the way the silence had served me when the business needed the space, in the way that sustained resentment serves the person who carries it, as a position, as the specific righteousness of someone who has been wronged and who has maintained their stance, who has not given the person who wronged them the satisfaction of being forgiven, who has held the ground, and who has structured their sense of themselves around the holding. That is its own kind of trap, not as obvious as the ones from the outside, but real, because the person you're most keeping the silence from is not the person you stop speaking to. It is yourself, the version of yourself that would have to exist in complexity, in the honest acknowledgement that your father is both the man who said those things and your father, that both things are true simultaneously, and that the silence has been a way of not having to hold both things at once, of keeping the picture simple. Him wrong, you right, the silence maintained. That picture is easier than the real one, and I have been living in the easier picture for long enough that entering the hospital that day required me to give it up, to step into the complex version, where both things were true, where I had one and where he was still my father, where what he had said had been wrong and where showing up was the right thing regardless, where the forgiveness I was choosing to offer was not the reward for his apology, but the decision I was making because I had built myself into someone capable of making it. I parked, sat in the car for a few minutes, not delaying, arriving at the version of myself that was going to walk through those doors. Settled, not performing settlement, actually settled, in the specific way of someone who has examined what they're doing and why, and has found the honest answer, and is proceeding on the basis of the honest answer rather than the comfortable one. I got out of the car, walked through the entrance, found the ward, found a room, and knocked on the door. He was smaller than I remembered. That was the first thing, not dramatically smaller. The particular way that illness reduces a person, not just physically, in the specific quality of how they occupy space. He had always been a man who filled a room with his presence, not loudly, through the specific weight of someone who is certain of their position in things, who moves through the world with the particular solidity of a person who has built what they set out to build, and knows it. That weight was reduced, not gone, reduced. He was sitting up when I came in, my mother in the chair beside him. She looked at me when I entered, the particular expression of someone who has been waiting for something they hoped would happen, and has just watched it happen. She stood, left the room briefly, in the specific instinct of someone who understood that what was about to occur needed to happen between two people, not three. He looked at me. I looked at him. Neither of us spoke for a moment. The particular weight of a room that has 4 years in it, that has a dinner table in it, that has things said and not said, things built and not acknowledged, for years of parallel lives that had not touched, all of it present in the few feet of hospital room between us. I sat down in the chair my mother had vacated, said his name. He said mine, in the way I remembered, the specific quality of his voice, which illness had not changed. He asked how I was. I said well. He nodded, the particular nod of someone who is processing more than the surface of a conversation. Then he said something I had not prepared for. He said he knew about the business, said he'd been following it, not directly, through my mother, through the occasional mention, through whatever information had moved through the family channels in the years of silence. He knew the shape of what I had built, the results it had produced, the recognition it had received. He said he knew, and then he said it hadn't surprised him. That last part landed in an unexpected place. I asked him what he meant. He was quiet for a moment. The particular quiet of a man who is finding the words for something he has not said before, who has been carrying it for a while, and is now at the specific juncture where carrying it further is no longer the right choice. He said he had known what I was capable of, had always known, that the argument at the dinner had not been about whether I could do it, had been about his fear that I would try, and that trying would cost me more than I understood. He said he had handled the fear badly, had let it express itself as disapproval rather than as what it actually was, which was the particular terror of a parent who has watched their child choose a difficult path, and who does not know how to say, "I'm frightened for you," without it coming out as, "I think you are wrong." He said those things were different, and that he had not distinguished between them, and that the failure to distinguish had cost both of them 4 years. I sat with that, not rushing to respond, letting him finish. He said he had been wrong to say what he said the way he said it, that the embarrassment line, the specific word, had been said in the heat of something, had been the fear talking in the cruelest language available to it, that he had known it was wrong almost immediately after saying it, had not known how to retrieve it, had tried the calls, had not found the words in the calls, had let the silence extend beyond what he had intended, until the silence had become its own thing, that neither of them had known how to address. I listened to all of it, the full account, delivered in the measured way of a man who was not performing remorse, who was simply saying the thing that had needed to be said for 4 years, in the only room where it had finally become possible to say it, a hospital room, which is its own kind of enforced honesty, because illness removes certain pretenses, makes the things that have been deferred feel more urgent, more necessary, more worth the discomfort they require. I had not needed the apology. By the time I sat in that chair, I had genuinely not needed it. The work was done. The life was built. The argument had been made in the only language that mattered. The apology was not what I had come for, but it arrived anyway, and I received it. I told him I accepted it, not immediately, after a moment of sitting with the full weight of what he had said, and what I wanted to say back. I told him I accepted the apology, that I understood the fear underneath what had been said, that I had not understood it at the time, had not had the distance then to separate the fear from the cruelty, but that I understood it now. He nodded, the same slow nod I had known my entire life. That carries more than agreement. That carries the specific gravity of a man who is processing something at a level below words. I told him something else. I told him the silence had not been only about what he had said, that it had served a purpose for me, had created the space I had needed to build without the weight of his disapproval in the room, that the 4 years had produced the thing they needed to produce. Not just the business, the specific person capable of sitting in this chair, without needing anything from him, without the apology being necessary for the conversation to be worth having. He looked at me for a moment, with the particular expression of someone who is seeing something they had not expected to see in a person they thought they knew. The version of me at 31 had walked out of dinner, had needed the silence to protect something that was still forming. The version sitting in a hospital chair did not need protection, was not forming, was already what it was going to be. That difference was visible to him. I could see him seeing it. He said I had become someone he was proud of. Said it simply, without the performance of pride, just the direct statement. The way he said direct things when he was saying them honestly rather than as part of a managed presentation. I received it, not with the hunger of someone who had been waiting years to hear it, with the specific calm of someone who had not needed to hear it, and was glad to hear it anyway, because the calming of an old need is its own particular feeling, not the satisfaction of a hunger satisfied, the relief of a tension released. something you had been holding without knowing you were holding it, finally allowed to stop. My mother came back into the room at some point. The three of us sat together for a while. In the particular quality of a family room after something significant has shifted, where the shift is not yet fully processed, but is present, felt by everyone, not requiring immediate conversation, just acknowledged in the specific quality of the silence that has replaced the previous one. The previous silence had been absence. This one was rest. The difference between those two silences is everything. We talked about ordinary things, the hospital, the treatment plan, what the recovery looked like, practical things, the kind of conversation that fills the space after a significant exchange, that allows people to exist together normally, without requiring the intensity to continue. I stayed for about 2 hours, left when it felt right, not abruptly, not extending it past what the moment required, just at the natural conclusion. My father and I had a different relationship to the ending of the visit than we had had to the beginning. The beginning had carried 4 years. The ending was just the ending of an afternoon. He said he was glad I had come. I said I was too. He said he hoped I would come back. I said I would. Said it without performance. Just simply, as the statement of intention it was. I found my mother in the corridor. She hugged me. The specific kind of hug that does not require words, that says what it needs to say through the fact of the holding. I drove home, sat in the kitchen with my wife, told her what had happened. She listened in the way she always listened, then asked how I was. I said lighter, the same word I would come to use again later in a different context, for a different kind of release. Because lighter is the right word, for the specific feeling of something being put down, that you have been carrying for long enough that the carrying has stopped feeling like carrying, has just started feeling like how things are, until you set it down, and understand from the setting down that it had weight, that you've been managing it. All along, he recovered, not quickly. The illness had been serious enough that the recovery required months rather than weeks. And the months required the particular patience of someone who has always defined themselves through activity, through building and doing, and the specific forward motion of a man who has never been comfortable with stillness. Illness enforces stillness, and the enforced stillness produced its own kind of work in him. The interior kind, the kind that active people are often the last to do, because activity is such an effective way of not doing it. I visited regularly during the recovery, not with the particular weight of someone fulfilling an obligation, with the genuine interest of someone who was finding out who his father actually was. When the illness had stripped away the performance of the position, the father as authority, the father as the person whose approval organized things. What was left when those things were removed was more interesting. A man with a specific history, with a particular way of thinking, with humor I had not had access to in the years when the relationship had been organized around a disagreement, with opinions about things that had nothing to do with career choices or stability or the things that had produced the dinner table. Just a person, with the full texture of a person, that I had not had access to before, because the access had required the conversation we had needed to have. And the conversation had required the hospital room. And the hospital room had required the 4 years. And the 4 years had required the dinner. All of it connected. All of it part of the path to something that was now genuinely there. I thought about that sometimes. The specific chain of events. Not with gratitude for the pain. Not with the particular construction that turns difficult things into necessary lessons. Just with honest acknowledgment of how things had actually moved. The dinner had produced the silence. The silence had produced the business. The business had produced the person who could walk into the hospital room from a position of genuine strength. The hospital room had produced the conversation. The conversation had produced what we had now, which was real, in the way that things are real when they have been earned, when they exist because two people chose them. Not because circumstance produced them automatically. We rebuilt slowly, with the specific care that you bring to something you understand is fragile in the early stages. Not fragile because the foundation was weak, because the foundation was new, and new things need time to set, need the gradual application of weight before you can trust them with a full load. We did not rush, did not try to compress 4 years of absence into the visits, just built what was available to be built, each visit producing a little more, each conversation going a little further than the one before. Not because we were performing progress, because progress was actually happening in a natural way of two people who have decided they want a relationship and who are doing the specific, ordinary work that wanting a relationship requires. He came to the business eventually, not as an inspection, as a visit, my invitation. I showed him what had been built, walked him through it, with the specific ease of someone who is comfortable with what they are showing, who does not need the showing to produce a particular reaction. He was quiet for most of it, asking occasional questions, the practical questions that were simply him, about margins and structures and how specific problems had been solved. The language of a man who had built something himself, looking at something built by someone else, with the genuine interest of a person who understood what building required. At the end, he stood in the main space, looked around, said nothing for a moment, and he said it was good work. In the specific way, he said things he meant, without embellishment, without the performance of praise, just the direct statement. I thanked him, said it simply, not with the hunger that would have received those words at 31, with the genuine appreciation of someone receiving something they no longer needed, which is its own kind of receiving, uncomplicated, clean. My wife and I had him and my mother for dinner some months after the recovery was complete. An ordinary evening, the kind that does not require significance, where 4 people sit around a table and eat and talk about the things people talk about. And I watched him across the table, the man who had called my dream an embarrassment, who had produced 4 years of silence with a word, who had been reduced by illness into something more honest, and who had used the honesty to say what had needed to be said. In a hospital room, on a day I had not been sure I was going to show up for. And I thought about the choice, the specific choice, of showing up not because he deserved it, but because I had built myself into someone who could make that choice from genuine strength. Not from need, not from obligation, not from the performed generosity of someone who forgives because forgiving looks good, from the actual position of someone who had one, who had built the thing, who was sitting across a dinner table with a full life and a real business and a marriage and the specific settled quality of someone whose choices had produced what they were supposed to produce. From that position, forgiveness was not a sacrifice. It was simply the most honest available response to a situation that had run its course. The silence had served its purpose. The work had been done. The argument had been made. The position had been demonstrated in the only language that actually meant anything. And the man across the table had done the specific difficult work of a proud man acknowledging he was wrong. In the only room where that work had become possible, there was nothing left to withhold. Nothing the withholding was still protecting. So I had shown up, and kept showing up, and the showing up had produced this. An ordinary dinner, which was the best possible outcome. Not the dramatic reconciliation, not the tearful reunion, just a table. For people, food, the ordinary texture of a family that functions. Unremarkable from the outside, everything from the inside. Forgiveness from strength is not something you give away. It is something you choose when you no longer need the other person to suffer for having hurt you. And that choice is only available to someone who has already built what they needed to build. If this story resonated with you, the 4 years, the hospital room, the choice to show up, leave it in the comments. I read every one, and the next story is already waiting for you.